Good morning and thanks for joining today's webinar looking at how businesses can automate enterprise visibility and control. My name is Shona Bradshaw. I'm the Marketing Manager at Bytes Security Partnerships, and we're delighted to be joined today by product specialists from our partners Check Point and ForeScout. We're going to be taking you through some developments and integrations they've made to both of their technologies in order to increase the level of visibility you have of threats and devices on your network, and then automate the enforcement of policies to protect your organizations against threats on those devices. So hopefully you can all hear me. Please do pop any feedback into the questions in the chat box, and I will make sure that we address those as we go. So a brief agenda for today's session. So I will be doing a very brief introduction to Bytes, and we'll keep it super brief, as many of you do know us already, before introducing the topic for today's webinar, which is all around automating visibility and control and how that plays a critical role in managing security risk in 2018. I'll be introducing Snir Hassidim, who's the Business Corporate Development Manager at Check Point, and Richard Agar, who looks after sales engineering at ForeScout. They'll be taking you through the bulk of today's presentation, which will be looking at how you can address weak security links and weak visibility spots in order to automate and control and manage threats in a more effective and efficient manner, therefore providing a solid defense against the types of threats that seek the weakest link and the weakest devices on your network in order to move laterally and spread threats within organizations. So a little bit of ground rules for today's session, a little bit of housekeeping. Attendee lines will be on mute throughout today's presentation. However, we do have a Q&A at the end. So please do, as they occur to you throughout the presentation, post your questions to Rich and Snir via the chat or the questions box, and I'll make sure that we do a full Q&A at the end. In terms of the crux of today's presentations, we'll be looking at strategy and solutions on today's presentation. We won't be getting into commercials on any particular products, etc. Of course, those conversations are more than welcome after the session with your Bytes account manager. We are recording today's session, so we will make that available to anyone that attends so that you can share that insight with your teams and review it at your leisure. And lastly, a quick request from me as the event manager. We do have a very short feedback survey at the end of the session. If you could kindly just take a couple of minutes to fill it in to make sure that these sessions continue to add value and continue to hit the mark technically, that would be most appreciated. So who are we? Who are Bytes? So we are the security specialist reseller within the Bytes technology group, and what we really aim to offer is to marry up the agility and the insight and the very personal approach you'd expect from the smallest specialist reseller with the stability, the resources and the scope that you would like to rely on from a large global player. So we're part of the multi-billion Bytes Allied Electronics group, but as a security specialist, we've been focusing and speaking to businesses across the UK around their security stack for over 16 years. We're very proud internally of the technical expertise that we add to solutions. We have consultancy and support and project scoping and technical services around all of the top tier vendor partners that we work with. So that's really where we aim to add value. We work across the entire spectrum of information security, from the next-gen firewalls and endpoint securities that Check Point provide, through to multi-factor authentication, network visibility, cloud security, mobile security. Essentially anything you can secure, then that's where we will be working with partners on. Across all of those areas, what we offer and what we add to the technologies that are available is that insight and the technical expertise that ranges from initial project planning and scoping through security strategy development, technology mapping, sessions such as today, which are educational in terms of future-proofing your business, and also then adding the actual consultant technology delivery, installation, maintenance and support. So that is enough about us. So why are we speaking to our customers and businesses at the moment about enterprise visibility? Well, over the last 5 years, there's just a plethora of additional types of devices that now access corporate resources. And those are both managed, therefore you would expect to be able to see them, and unmanaged from IoT devices, BYOD. We're talking around guest access, etc. And that means that there are real security blind spots that the traditional type of solutions that you may already have invested in really haven't got the visibility and control of. This is coupled with at the time where volume and impact of attacks is increasing. Organizations, hacker organizations, are increasingly looking to find weak links in the security chain to have an inflection point where they can then, once inside your network, spread laterally and cause damage. This means that we really do need an automated and end-to-end approach to seeing the devices that are there, understanding whether those devices are keeping within the company policies and are behaving as normal, and then taking action to make sure that corporate resources are protected. And that's what we've asked Check Point and ForeScout to introduce to you today. So all that remains for me to do really is to introduce Snir and Rich. So they're product specialists from Check Point and ForeScout. Snir looks after the threat prevention suite, Infinity suite that Check Point have developed to augment their traditional firewalls with next generation threat prevention. Check Point have been a 4-star elite top tier partner of Bytes for over 5 years. So they're a really critical part of our business, and we work with them hand in hand to ensure that companies are providing the best level of network security on-premise and in the cloud they can have. We've been working with ForeScout for several years on the network control and network visibility side. And when we heard that Check Point and ForeScout have developed a joint integration to both increase the level of threat prevention you can have and actually see what's going on with managed and unmanaged devices, we really felt it was worth sharing with our customers and businesses that we're working with. So I'm going to hand over to Snir. Next person that you'll hear from is Snir, and you'll see his screen, and I'll pop back on at the end to ask your questions to our two presenters today. Over to Snir.
Okay, thanks, Shauna. Let me just get set up in here with the screen sharing. And here we go. Can anyone see my screen properly? Shauna, are we good?
I'm still on the holding screen at the moment, so I think you just need to share your screen. We're still not able to see your screen as of yet, Snir.
How about now?
Perfect, lovely. I'll leave you to it and mute myself off. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Shauna. So hi, everyone. I'm Snir from the Business Development Group here at Check Point. And today we'll talk a bit about Check Point Infinity, and I'll spice it up a bit with a few slides about the connected office and IoT. So first, let's jump in with a quick glance at the tip of the iceberg for 2017. We had a lot of action. So everything's connected. With new devices joining the enterprise networks directly or indirectly by the masses, they exhibit autonomous network behavior. Initially, it's used as a means to improve user experience. However, these new devices can easily become an attack vector. Now we have attacks everywhere. We've seen ransomware all over the place on so many iterations that it's pretty much getting hard to count by now. And over 1 million Google accounts and Android devices have been breached, as we revealed in our own research, which, by the way, you're more than welcome to view and share at blog.checkpoint.com. Several dozens of Play Store apps included no less than 5 exploits to install a rootkit and compromise Android devices. It's more detailed in our research. You're more than welcome to take a look at it. Now, to top it all off, the NSA leaks really helped show just how dire the situation can get. We could even see script kiddie grade attacks utilizing government-sponsored and government-grade cyber weapons. Now, it would seem that, it was some kind of a security wake-up call for us. And we're at an inflection point right now. So ransomware, crypto mining, and an LG vacuum cleaner that had remote access tools just come to show that we're looking at a new generation of diverse attack patterns. And well, our protections are not necessarily up to par. So let's take a quick look at these generations of attacks. The first one we all know and love, the usual viruses with regular PC attacks, and an antivirus would manage to hold them off with signatures. Easy as it gets. Next one was attacks from the internet. Basic ACL, attack a certain port and no authentication, no integrity, just go in and do whatever you want. That was when the firewall was relevant. The next phase, the next generation, was vulnerability exploitation. CVEs that can be triggered over network traffic, and that's where IPS, intrusion prevention systems, and IDS come into play. And last but not least is the payload, polymorphic content that we're handling with Check Point Sandblast, our sandboxing technology, our industry-leading sandboxing technology, as well as anti-bot, where we use to mitigate against command and control requests, DNS requests, or any attempt to retrieve information from a C2 server by a bot, which is essentially just another term for a Trojan horse. So Generation 1 affected 100% of businesses. Generation 2 affected, yet again, 100%. Generation 3 affected about 50%. And, well, the ones that required advanced threat prevention, they affected about 7% from what we've gathered. So Generation 4 is no longer enough. And we need something just beyond simple detection. Our key motto at Check Point, as some of you may already know, is that prevention is key. And we believe in real-time action, covering our weakest point, not just the data center, not just the enterprise perimeters, but also cloud environments and mobile. In this specific scenario, cloud environments and mobile appear for us, as just another pillar in the world of visibility, which we'll soon address. So, as you can clearly see, there are quite a lot of categories or solutions that get, siloed on, and eventually, it seems like it's not manageable. And eventually, we bring in Check Point Infinity, which brings all the Check Point security blades you all know and love, and the Check Point industry-leading management interface in a coherent manner together with third parties. And this is something that we're working very hard to achieve at Check Point as part of this approach. We want to make sure that we're integrated and compatible with industry-leading solutions such as ForeScout's NAC, which we will address soon enough. So in 2018, as far as our offerings go, we're looking at 3 new things generally. The first one is new security management appliances that we'll be providing for customers who still like to keep the on-premises deployment of a large Check Point management and log server. We're looking at Check Point CloudGuard that we recently introduced, CloudGuard SaaS and CloudGuard IaaS, which IaaS is our new VSec, and CloudGuard SaaS is our offering for SaaS applications such as G Suite, for example. And last but not least, a new security consumption model, which will let you reach an all-inclusive payment form, pay as you grow, which you're more than welcome to discuss with our various channel partners. So let's talk a bit about IoT. We can clearly see it's all around us, connected home, smart cities, industrial IoT, and so on. And it will remain to be a substantial part of our lives. Now, as far as the numbers go, I'm just going to run through this real quick because it's just not technical enough, I guess, for all of us. So again, a lot of devices in 2020, and more than 25% of cyber attacks will involve IoT devices, and that's Gartner. So all kinds of locations, all kinds of segments and verticals. Let's focus on 2 of these: offices and smart buildings. So when it comes to protecting IoT, it goes by simply, beyond just a firewall, just a set of rules. IoT brings in a lot of challenges. The devices inherently lack security. They lack the processing power to provide, proper security against exploitation, which can later compromise your network. So most of the devices don't have the security mechanisms built in. there are a lot of protocol vulnerabilities that we heard a lot about this past year, a lot of Wi-Fi related vulnerabilities. And they just, again, allow the attackers to attack from within the internal network. And updating, well, in most IoT devices, especially the ones that aren't backed by a major brand, they're simply not being updated regularly and well, probably not managed correctly. And additionally, they can exhibit lateral movement by, again, running third-party code that wasn't designed to run on that device. So where should we focus? Discovery, segmentation, and threat prevention. Let's take a look at the enterprise environment. We have all kinds of devices there, from consoles in the game rooms to the air conditioners on top of the building, the elevators, and so on. All these devices may exhibit network behavior and can be exploitable to some extent. And there are two locations to look into here. The first one is the actual building and its various infrastructure related components. The second one is the office itself and the various vectors that can be used in an attack. While people see some things and IoT things, we see a Trojan horse. Now, the corporate building has all kinds of smart building management systems that eventually have network access. And if you don't do it right, eventually, without proper segmentation, these devices can exhibit lateral movement. And this is something that really needs to be protected against. And honestly, this is where ForeScout really shines. And we'll get to that in a bit. Now, Infinity is our mission to secure the corporate office. As far as discovery goes, we want to discover all the devices on the net and the various networks and the ways that they can reach the internal network. We want to integrate with the various NAC vendors and first and foremost with ForeScout and understand what is an authenticated and an unauthenticated device and provide them with certain network access depending on their access level. And the checkpoint security gateways allow these scenarios to take place with the ForeScout integration. And I took an active role in some of the design and implementation of this integration, and I would personally vouch for the quality of the code. Yet another thing is segmentation. We'd like to automatically segment between devices and utilize the checkpoint granular security and policy enforcement. And we would like to divert unknown devices to quarantine them, block them, or just prevent them from accessing the production network. This is enabled through ForeScout. We want to provide prevention. We want to control device behavior. We want to have anomaly detection, and we want to do IPS cross-referencing and understand which CVE triggered a certain IPS protection and do the forensics analysis on that later on, as well as apply the threat prevention best practices, which can be covered by our various partners, our professional services group, as well as our incident response team. And the last item is protocol integrity and parsing through the new IoT protocols together with anomaly detection. This is enabled by the checkpoint application control and URL filtering blades that provide us with URL filtering specifically is pretty much tacked onto the same GUI, but the actual blade that takes place in this scenario is the application control blade, where you can specify wanted, desired, or undesired actions in the security policy for a given device. And we can parse the various IoT protocols, and we're always in research to provide new protocol support, new action support that can be defined in our security policies. So that's pretty much it on my end. And I would like to pass this on to Rich to talk a bit about the ForeScout offering. Shauna, take it away.
Okay, over to Rich. I've just passed control to Richard. So if you can just share your screen, please, Rich.
And I should be able to see that, Shona.
Just waiting 1 second. I've still got the holding screen, but we do have a little bit of a lag. So can you just share your screen again, please? Not yet seeing it. Richard, we don't yet see your screen, I'm afraid. Richard, are you with us?
I am. Sharing at my end here.
Okay, that's fine. So I can see your screen now. That's fine. I'm just going to mute myself off and leave you to it to present the rest.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shannon. So yeah, my name is Rich Agar, and I'm a systems engineer working for ForeScout out of the UK and Ireland. So there are three challenges relevant to the discussion today that we're seeing again and again at ForeScout, and that's the growth of the number of devices connecting to corporate networks and the diversity of the platforms that they're using. Seeing increasing adoption in terms of cloud technologies, and we're starting to see convergence between traditional IT networks and operational technology networks. So just going back to the first point there about growth of devices and platform diversity, this is really the IoT growth that Snir was talking about. So we're seeing increasing number of IoT type devices that are existing on corporate networks. So these are devices that are not manageable by traditional techniques. They're not running traditional operating systems. And as Snir said, there are challenges in terms of securing those devices because they don't tend to be able to be patched or upgraded. It's not possible to manage the vast majority of these devices via traditional agent-based technologies just because the vendors don't provide that kind of capability. So at ForeScout, we have three areas that we operate in, shown on the left-hand side of the slide here. That's see, control, and orchestrate. And I'm just going to go through each of those very briefly now. So C is all about providing visibility of every IP addressable device that exists on a corporate network, and doing that without having to have any agent software installed. We discover those devices, we classify them, we assess them to be able to apply the correct level of access required. So once we know what kind of a device is connected to the network, we start to apply some policies to that. So that can be purely a notification policy to the end user. It could be a notification policy to the admin team, or it could be integration into third-party ticketing systems or log management systems, etc. We can also start to bring devices automatically into compliance. So some examples of that could be if a device is connected to the network but certain patches are missing and it's a managed device, we can push those patches to that device, or we can update antivirus. We can check and see that certain security applications are installed and running. Or we could look for certain vulnerable applications and prevent those from running on the endpoint. But then coming back to the IoT theme, we're able to apply some restrictions around a device and apply some controls to make sure that devices that access the network have the appropriate level of access. So an example shown on the left here, we've got two two device types, a security camera and a Windows PC. A Windows PC would be identified, it might be, in this case, it might be identified as a non-managed PC and have no network access. If it was a managed PC that was compliant, it would be given access to the production network. But IoT devices such as security cameras, building management systems, door entry systems, etc., we're able to identify those and apply the appropriate level of access by segmenting their access to the network. And then from an orchestration point of view, we have a number of different extended modules where we're working with our business partners, different vendors who allow us to be able to share the contextual information we have about every IP addressable device that sits on an organization's network. We'll share that information with third parties, and we're going to look at how we do that with Check Point. So we have two different integrations with Check Point. The first thing we're going to look at is the integration with Check Point Threat Prevention. So the Check Point device is able to detect advanced threats and indicators of compromise as they're passing through the firewall device. ForeScout extends that by being able to analyze all of the devices on the network as they're joining the network and look for those indicators of compromise, and to be able to apply policy to restrict, remove or manage the access that those devices have to the network. Check Point sitting at the perimeter, it's able to identify devices that are either communicating with command and control networks or are downloading software that's been identified as potentially malicious. ForeScout can extend that by scanning the endpoint to work out whether it's actually vulnerable to that exploit and whether the exploit has been successful. If it has been successful, ForeScout is able to isolate that endpoint and protect the rest of the network from that compromised endpoint. And again, Check Point consider the various choke points in a network and prevent outbound connection. At ForeScout, we extend that by providing additional context that can be used for incident response. So we know who the logged in user is, what kind of a device it is, what applications were installed, location, etc., etc. So then if we look at the integration we have with the next generation firewall, that's really where we're looking at using the firewall to be able to apply dynamic network segmentation. So based on the information that ForeScout knows about a device that's joined the network, we can dynamically assign segmentation so we can control the access that that device has based on the device itself, what type of device it is. We can also look at the identity of any user context. So we could look at a user, say they may be an employee, they may be a contractor, they may be a guest. We can enable the firewall to assign different levels of access based on the user identity as well. And the benefit of this is that it really reduces the attack surface. We're applying that segmentation to keep different device types within their own network segments and help organizations manage the risk of these different devices on the network. So now we're going to look at the advanced threat detection integration, and I'm just going to show you the basic steps of how that works with ForeScout. So the first step here is that the compromised device or the at-risk device here will be downloading some software or communicating outbound, and the Check Point threat prevention system will be monitoring that traffic and will detect some malware or some advanced threat. It can then send some notification through to ForeScout about the affected endpoint, so it'll send the IP address of the affected endpoint and some information about the indicator of compromise. Now, the next thing that happens there is that ForeScout is able to identify how that device has connected to the network. It will then connect through to the access device and can apply a control policy to restrict or remove the access that that device has to the network. Usually speaking, we would have two steps to that process. We would check to see whether the device is indeed vulnerable, and if it is vulnerable, we'd check to see whether the indicator of compromise is present on that device, and if it is, we would apply some control around that. We can then start to look at how we might want to apply some remediation on that device. So we can start some workflows that would help to bring that device, remove the threat from that device and bring it back into production. At the same time, we will start to scan the rest of the network for that indicator of compromise, because it's possible that when that device was infected, it immediately started to try and laterally move across the network. So Counteract will scan for other endpoints and identify whether they have been compromised or not. And then, of course, as new devices come and join the network, we'll immediately look for those indicator of compromise as well. So bringing that together, in terms of detection, we'd look at Check Point to be able to provide detection of these advanced threats, to be able to provide control at certain perimeter points in the network, and to be able to then look at Counteract to be able to isolate and to quarantine infected connection points at the point that they're connected to the network, to be able to manage that risk between that device and its connection to the network. So now we're going to look at the next generation firewall and the integration that we have between the Check Point next generation firewall and ForeScout. So as mentioned previously, when a device joins the network, Counteract will immediately see that device join the network. It will discover it and it will classify it and assess the device as soon as it's joining the network. We then have some detailed information about that device. We know what kind of a device it is. We know what the user context is. If it's managed, we know about the patch status, the security profile status of that device. If it's an IoT device, we'll be able to categorize that as a medical device or a CCTV camera or a smart TV, etc. And we can send that information through to the next generation firewall. And the firewall can then use that information to apply either identity-based or context-based security policies to be able to segment those devices, to give them the access that they need to the network without giving them too much access. So we see, in terms of Check Point, we see very strong perimeter network security, the ability to be able to monitor and control traffic, to be able to identify those next generation threats. At ForeScout, we're very much looking at the devices that join the network and being able to apply control around those devices, be they managed or unmanaged devices. So we see from Check Point, we see enforcement of policies based on application, based on IP, port and protocol. That ForeScout really helps with that, by being able to, for any kind of a device that joins the network, to be able to provide information about user ID or device context, and to be able to do that without having to have any agent software installed on the device. Again, when we talked about segmentation, Check Point is able to segment at certain points in the network, the perimeter, certain other choke points in the network. At ForeScout, we're able to classify those devices to give the firewall information so it can apply those controls. So that's all I want to say from a ForeScout point of view. If you need to contact us, our email address is there, uk@forescout.com. But I'm going to pass back to Shona now.
Okay, thank you very much to both Snir and Rich for your introductions and presentations around how the Check Point and ForeScout integration can help automate that visibility and control. I'd just like to pass over to anyone in the audience to pose your questions to our presenters. Don't be shy. Please do type them in via the questions in the chat box, and then I'll give a few minutes just to ask those questions to our our presenters, and then before we wrap up for the day. So please do take a couple of minutes to just pop any questions, any thoughts through, and I will pose those to the presenters over the next couple of minutes.
In the meantime, I guess I could share a few tidbits on the tech around the integration. So just for any checkpoint experts or people who know their way around our products and APIs, the NGFW capabilities that detect the ForeScout uses to detect devices on the network and then send this information over to us is powered by the identity awareness APIs, which are available starting from R77.30 as a hotfix and are already integrated in the latest R80 releases. So that's the segmentation piece. And for IOC withdrawal from the threat prevention blades, the various ones such as anti-bot, antivirus, threat emulation, these are provided using our OPSEC LIA API, which is our log export API. So ForeScout digests very specifically curated logs to enable this scenario. And those are pretty much the two core APIs used in this specific integration.
Okay, thank you, Snir. I do have a question from one of the audience. I think this is probably it may well have been answered in your previous statement, but I'm just going to ask it anyway, just for clarity. What does the technical integration look like within Smart Dashboard, or if not Smart Dashboard, how does it integrate? You may well have asked that because you did mention API.
Yeah. So first, on my side, those are the APIs that have been used. And Rich, if you could follow up to explain how it looks like in your GUI, that would be great. But just first off, we've recently announced Smart Console extensions. And this is something that we're currently pursuing to integrate and automate and orchestrate various pieces in the network and various solutions from our own consolidated management, that is Smart Console. It used to be called Smart Dashboard before the R80 days, but at the moment we're calling it Smart Console. So the extensions will eventually provide a native GUI experience. That's something that's pretty much set in stone on our roadmap. So Rich, if you could talk a bit, I guess, about your GUI and implementation.
Yeah, so the integration is pretty simple from a ForeScout point of view. Effectively, the information that we receive from Checkpoint is the IP address of the device. If there is an indicator of compromise, we'll receive that, and that tends to be either maybe IP addresses that the device is making outbound connections to, DNS names, or more commonly it will be a hash of a particular file to show that file is present on the endpoint. And then the third piece of information we'd see is some kind of threat identifier, some sort of threat level, so that can allow Counteract to be able to make a decision based on policy as to what the response action should be. Clearly, we'll see different threats from sort of low severity through to high severity threats, and we want to be able to respond in a different manner. But essentially, it's quite a simple integration. The firewall telling Counteract it's seen a threat. This is the IP address that's associated with it. Here's some information about the threats, and here's the level of risk.
Okay, I have a second question. So I'm assuming I'm posing this more to Rich than to Snir. Can you describe some differences between this and Aruba ClearPath?
I can. We'll probably handle that in more detail offline. I can see that's from Dave. I think the most significant two differences between the ForeScout solution and Aruba, of course, this is always based on an individual organization's use cases, but the two most significant I see are that Counteract is a completely agentless solution. So we don't have to have any software installed on an endpoint to be able to get visibility, to classify it, and to be able to enforce remediation actions on that endpoint. So that would be one of the differences that I would see. The other most significant difference is in terms of network device support. So ForeScout as an independent, a non-network vendor, we don't make wired or wireless network infrastructure. We have the broadest support for different network devices. And that's something that we see as in most organizations as being important. The ability to be able to support different vendors, and also even if an organization has just one vendor's network infrastructure, we tend to have some very broad support and be able to support older versions of software, older versions of hardware from a networking point of view. And that can really help when it comes to the business case. We've seen many customers being required to upgrade network infrastructure to be able to apply a competitor solution, and quite often they don't have to do that with ForeScout.
Super, that's perfect. Thank you very much for your answer. And also to Vincent asked that, of course, we can follow that up in more detail on request via your Bytes account manager. He can provide you with more information on request after the webinar. So I haven't got any further questions at the moment. All that remains for me to do is to thank you all for your time in attending and taking time out of your busy day in order to listen and gain from today's presentation. And also thank our two presenters for taking time out of their schedules to run through some of the ideas and concepts that they have introduced today with us. I'm just going to close the webinar now. Thank you all, and please do remember to fill in the short feedback survey at the end if you've got a moment. Many thanks.